Hey, happy Friday, all. Saying hello to you here from London, and a very windy and cold London actually at the moment. So we have officially gone into spring, but it certainly doesn't feel that way. It's snowing for a few hours, and then it's sun shining, blue skies for another few hours. But just wanted to jump on. For those of you who have been subscribed or watched any of our latest videos, it is about how to rent in London series, especially where we're getting so many more overseas tenants applications coming through. And that comes from professionals, students. I mean, London is very much back in motion. In fact, it probably feels busier than it was pre-pandemic. And what's happened with that is that competition for rental properties has just really just hit the roof. Um, there is a shortage of rental properties and therefore very competitive. The prices have also increased. So at the back of the how to rent in London series, we've had so many questions come through emails, text message, and some of those messages through our YouTube videos. And I just wanted to, I thought to myself, okay, so if people are asking me these questions again and again, surely it will be very, very valuable if I should just jump on a live video, which I haven't done for a while. So a little bit rusty, do bear with me. And just share with you the answers to these questions. And if you have any questions yourselves in terms of sending that across, let me know. I'm going to try and do one of these live videos at least once every week. So hopefully we can keep consistent with it, if there's any demand for it at least. I know that we help a lot of overseas people, a lot of expats from the USA, from different parts of Europe, Asia as well. And that's growing even more and more as we go into spring and summer, which actually we'll dive into as to why it gets so busy during the summer times and whether it's worth actually avoiding that. So in terms of questions, so one of the questions that I get a lot actually is is renting in London expensive? And the answer to that is compared to other cities across the world, yes, it is. In fact, it's one of the most expensive cities around the world. And if you want to rent somewhere sort of half decent, at least in prime London, then it's going to cost you around about £1,800 per calendar month in central London. And what's happened with prices over the course of the last 24 months, at least with the pandemic, is the properties dropped, which was wonderful for tenants, of course, because they were really enjoying rental properties in certain areas that perhaps they may have not been able to enjoy in normal times. Actually, let's jump on to Rightmove, which, if you're not familiar with Rightmove, it is actually a portal in which you can actually search for properties. If you're tuning in from the US, I think it would be the equivalent of, let's say, Zillow, where you could actually jump on and look at properties yourself. So here on a Rightmove, you'll see that we have properties for one-bed flats. They'll start anything from around about £1,800 and then start to increase. Let's start from here, from newest. This is from newest, so highest price. Let's start from the lowest price in terms of one-bed flats. So actually, so you can see 1,500, 1,600. The quality of these properties at this lower end, and yet that is the lower end, may not be great. In fact, they very likely won't be great. I think you start getting a little bit more quality as you start hitting that 1,700 and £1,800, and that can go up. If we look at in terms of the highest, this is East London, by the way, which is probably still one of the areas that you can still get some decent rental prices. So this is actually on the lower end in comparison to West London, Northwest London, and other parts of prime London. So if we come here, for example, and we go to the highest, let's see what comes up. So you've got £5 grand, £5,000, £3,000 for a one-bed flat in East London. And this area in East London, particularly being Shoreditch, Hoxton, which are areas that have been very, very popular over the course of the last 10 years or so. Hasn't been that way always, as many parts of London have been gentrified. Quite a few neighborhoods, actually, which you'd be surprised if you look back at them sort of 20 years, 25 years back, especially Hackney, and also parts of Islington. But in terms of expensive, that probably is on average and consistent £1,800. Whether you're looking at Hackney, whether you're looking at Islington, same thing. You're looking at £1,800 for starting at one bed flat. Camden Borough, around about the same. And as you go into sort of Mayfair, of course, that does change. You're then looking around about £2,500. That's really prime London, and you will be looking at a higher price. I hope that gives you some insight in terms of what kind of properties that you'll be able to find and where that the average price for one bed flats will start from. We have got videos that of areas and what you get for your money, so do make sure you check them out. I believe one of them is the best London boroughs, 4 London boroughs to live in London, and that also gives you an idea as to what you could get for your money. And I'm sure there are a couple of videos out there. If there's a particular area that you actually want to check out, feel free to just message us. We're always very proactive around London, and we're always happy to share what you get for your money. That goes for rental and sales. So just to jump on, and if you're on live, feel free to just send a message. But also, we love to find out where you're actually tuning in from, what part of the world or different cities in the UK. Please feel free to share what your location is. Okay, so the other question, which is quite common, is where can I find listings? And we have videos for that as well. But just to give you an overview, there are quite a few places you can find. So you do have Rightmove, which is the portal that I shared with you. You also got the likes of Zoopla, and there are also other platforms that work very well. So you've got, I think, the likes of MoveBubble. You also got Prime Location. You got Gumtree, which, again, if you're tuning in from the US, will be the equivalent of, I think it's Craigslist, if I'm not mistaken. So quite a few portals. It can be quite confusing sometimes as to which to stick to. I would say to start off with Rightmove and Zoopla, which are pretty much the leading portals here, and then you can sort of explore with other portals such as Spare Room, as an example. I know that a lot of landlords like to use Spare Room, so you can actually rent a property directly from a landlord through Spare Room if you wanted to avoid agents. I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but if you did, a Spare Room would probably be a good portal for you to look at. And specifically, I mean, the name is on the tin, right? You can also look for rooms, accommodations through Spare Room. So in terms of other questions, you got what documents? It really depends on whether you are working, whether you're a student, whether you're looking to actually find a job here and you haven't actually quite found something. There is a video which explains that in depth. I'm not going to go in too much depth right now because it is quite lengthy in terms of the documents. But overall, it's sort of your work contract. You need to give your employer's details so they can, the referencing company, can reach directly out to your employer. If you're coming from overseas, they will want to try and do a credit check. The reality is the referencing company can't do a credit check, or they can do, but it's just not valid here in the UK. So that goes on to the other question, which is, I don't want to pay 6 months in advance. How can I kind of bypass that? And the answer to that is you can have a guarantor, UK guarantor, that meets that financial criteria, that does have the credit history for those checks, who then will be approved, and then that guarantor can then step in for you. If you don't have a guarantor and you don't have a job secured, as an example, you're going to have to pay 6 months rent in advance. There's no other way. If you do have a job secured, you will be approved for the report. However, there is an insurance that the landlord should want to take out, which protects them. And even if you have a job and you have secured that job here, and even if you've got an approved report, referencing report, the challenge that you're going to have is if the landlord wants that insurance, the insurance is going to decline. And therefore, the insurance is going to say, go back to the tenant and get 6 months rent in advance, and then we can insure you. And that's the challenge that the landlord will have. So just to clarify, you will have an approved reference saying, actually, this tenant is absolutely great. you can rent to this person. They've got a job, they have the means to pay, clearly, with the job that they have. They have great referencing from landlords. They have a visa to reside in the UK. It's amazing. Green tick, approved, stamped. But the landlord may still say, oh, that's great, but still pay me 6 months in advance. In fact, let me share with you something, because I came across a report here with regards to the 6 months. And it was a tenant which was quite upset. And I can understand from a tenant's point of view why they would be upset, because they seem to have everything in line, which I just shared with you. And yet they still were asked to pay 6 months in advance. And they were quite upset about it. So I don't know anyone here who meets the guarantor criteria. And this was on the BBC. And you know, they had to fork out 6 months rent in advance. And the thing is, when you pay that 6 months, when you come into the near end of that 6 months tenancy, you're going to have to pay again. So at the 7th month, you pay another 6 months. That is a lot of money, especially, let's say you have a £30,000 rental property for the year. That's £15,000. But that is the system that we have in the UK. Now, I'm going to speed this up because I'm going to run out of battery. I didn't charge my Mac, and I have an issue with the charger. But I think this is at least been valuable to you so far. And if you feel that you want to ask more questions and we do run out of battery and I don't have a charger, please feel free to just send a message, and we'll be doing this on a weekly basis. I've got a ton of questions here, but here's another one. Hey, Danny. Should I rent a new build, or should I rent a period conversion? Now, period conversions are great. They have great character, lots of character, especially if you're moving into areas such as Hampstead, as an example, which comes with that whole feel of renting in London or living in London. However, a period conversions can be challenging at sometimes. You know, they're not going to be a straightforward new build where, you know, there might be a little flooring that may creak here and there. The plumbing may be slightly old, even though they've renovated, which most period conversions are, but they may be more challenging than a new build. Sometimes, for example, the noise from a neighbor can also be a little bit louder than comparison to a purpose-built new build as well. So there are some challenges that you may have with period conversions, but overall, we rent a lot of conversions, and you know, those challenges come up from time to time, and if they do, tenants just deal with them, and they love it because they get to experience that whole character of living in a flat that's being converted. The new builds, you can also get the amenities that comes across with it. Sometimes the security in terms of concierge, but then you'll be paying more for that as well. So there is a fine balance there. This is a great question. I think we're going to wrap up on this one, which is utility bills. A question we get all the time from overseas expats looking to come in and rent in London. And it is, Danny, okay, this is going to cost me in rent. How much is the council tax going to be? And then how much do I pay in utility bills? And it's a great question, but it's slightly challenging to answer that, because it really depends on how much you actually consume, and we all consume different, especially in today's world where a lot of people are actually working from home, as opposed to going out every day from 8 o'clock in the morning to probably very late in the evening, because if you finish work, maybe going out with colleagues and so forth. So it really depends. I know historically, for example, we've always said sort of your electricity bill should be anything for one. I'm talking about for one-bed flats, because of course it also depends on how many people are living in the property. If a one-bed flat or studio flat, it's just yourself, you're looking around about £50, £60 for electricity, and around about the same with gas. That being said, that's going to vary, of course, during the summertime and during winter, and that's also going to vary, of course, of how much you're actually going to be in the property. But in today's world, energy costs are going through the roof. So how much that changes, it really depends on what the continued challenge that's happening with oil and gases and prices going through the roof. So I hope that's somewhat helpful in terms of utility bills. So yeah, around about £100 to £150 with gas and electric, and then you have your council tax to deal with, of course. I'm going to wrap that up for now in terms of Q&A, just simply because I'm mindful about the battery running out. But I think it's been helpful. I think it's been valuable. And keep those questions coming across. We are entering into a very busy period, spring and summer, which again, that's another question that's asked as to when is a good time to look for a property rental in London. Know that spring and summer is very competitive. I can explain a little bit more about that as to why that is next week. But if you could avoid, for example, summer, specifically sort of July, August, and September, you will do well because you'll be competing with a lot of people. But then again, those are the dates where you get the best properties come onto the market. So there's a bit of a balance there as to the pros and cons, which I'm happy to share with you next week. Do send me across messages as to what questions you want answered and what part of the world you are actually coming from. And do check out the videos we do have, which may answer some other questions that have come from this video today. Have an amazing weekend. If you're already in London, wrap up warm because it is extremely cold. And speak to you or see you next week. Thank you.